All righty, it is noon. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this club luncheon where we're going to talk about all the ballot issues. The goal of the club is to bring together all Democrats, from the most conservative to the most progressive, to celebrate our shared values and appreciate who we are, and to work together to put more Democrats in office. I would like to acknowledge our club lunch sponsor, Albrechta and Albrechta Law Firm. They've been supporting us for several years now. So if you need legal help, please think about Albrechta and Albrechta here in Durango. Like I said, today we'll hear about all the 14 ballot initiatives that are in the Blue Book, and we have a couple of local issues as well. We're going to make this look easy. We have 10 speakers. That sounds ambitious, but we got it all handled. They'll each have 5 minutes total for a short presentation and maybe answer a couple questions. So put your questions in the chat box. And that's how we'll handle it. So I just want to say in the beginning, constitutional amendments have to pass with 55% of the vote now, and propositions pass with a majority vote. Everyone's asked to stay muted except for the speaker, myself, and Gwen Unger, who will be helping with questions. If you want to submit a question different from the ones we're asking, please use the chat feature. I already said that. Please do not just unmute yourself and speak, because we have too many people here. Send your questions to everyone in the chat window. You'll see the little drop-down address thing. If you're having trouble with internet connectivity, you may want to disable your video. So audio only works better on slower connections. The Zoom meeting's being recorded and it'll be available within a day or so for viewing on our YouTube channel. So you just go to youtube.com, put La Plata Democrats Club in the search bar, and you'll get all the ones we've recorded, plus this one. You can choose speaker mode in the top right corner of your little box, and it'll bring up a larger video of the person speaking. I'd like to encourage everyone to donate to the La Plata County Dems in this year. It keeps the office rented, and we can accumulate funds ahead of the need. Monthly donations are particularly appreciated, and you can set those up on ActBlue. This is our 9th meeting. We've had one every month, except one. Next month is the election, so we won't have a meeting in November. So check on the Dems website to see if we're having a December meeting and what that's all about. The club committee is working to continue to bring great programs for you in the future. If you have any announcements to make that aren't related to this, please enter something in the chat window and we'll recognize you at the end. So now I'd like to okay, we're sharing screen. I didn't announce that, but that's, and I see your whole desktop. So if you can get
That's
on.
unfortunate. I'm really sorry about that. That's quite the mess.
Well, I mean, I see that page, whatever it is, in Word. So I see on the right, I see the big screen, and then on the left, I see all the panels.
That's really weird. Anybody who wants to hop in here and tell me what I'm doing wrong, is that better, you guys? Not entirely?
It's the same thing. Do you know how to do that?
So if you stop sharing your screen, and then when you reshare, and then you click share again, for your screen, it'll have you pick which window you want to share, and then you can pick the presentation.
Great. Sorry about that, you guys.
In the meantime, Marsha Porter Norton has put a little announcement that there's going to be a town hall about homeowners insurance, which is great. That's October 9th, so that'll be next Thursday from 1 to 3.
Is that any better, you guys, or not?
No, I still see the full desktop with the beautiful birds and all.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've never had this problem before. Good timing, huh?
And this is Mary. Can you click the little dots in the left-hand corner? Is there a green dot?
Or go to slideshow.
Yeah, go to slideshow and then it'll at least
show that your whole screen. So on top menu, there's slideshow
I'm sorry, you guys, I do not see that.
right
Right,
there.
you're right next to it, where your cursor is. Keep coming to the left, down. See it says slideshow?
No,
You're right on it. Your cursor's right on it.
I understand. I do not see the word slideshow. Shit, I'm sorry. I should have tried this before, you guys. I apologize. I used this last night. It worked just fine. Okay, why don't we go ahead and begin with the first one? We'll have Maria Ignacia Miranda Santis speak from Freedom to Marry, and Beatriz Garcia with the ACLU to back up her comments, and Lori Menninger. Amendment J is, and you will see this in just a moment when I get it together. I apologize for that. Amendment J repeals the language in the Constitution that defines a valid marriage as only a union between one man and one woman. Why don't you guys work on introducing yourselves and talking about that while I figure out what the heck I'm doing wrong on my end? Thank you.
Yeah, I can start. Thank you for saying my whole name, first of all. My name is Maria Ignacia. I use she, her, and ella pronouns. I'm the Deputy Campaign Director for the Freedom to Marry Colorado campaign. And we're the campaign running Amendment J this fall. I'll let the person from ACLU go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hello. Hi, this is Beatriz Garcia. I am the president of the board of ACLU Colorado, and I will be sharing this space with other staff that it's actually in charge of the campaign that We Are the Vote. As if someone doesn't know who ACLU is, it's the American Civil Liberties Union, and we are nonpartisan organization, and we dedicate our efforts to be able to support civil rights. So thank you so much for having me.
I can jump into my presentation about Amendment J. So many of you might be asking yourselves, like, why are we doing this, right? I thought we had same-sex marriage was legalized across the country. And unfortunately, in 2006, there was a ban on same-sex marriage that was passed here in Colorado, like Colorado voters, that defines marriage as between one man and one woman in our Constitution. 2006, as many of you know, was a very different time for Colorado, and we've come a long way since then. At the federal level, same-sex marriage was legalized by the 2015 U.S. Supreme Court decision in Obergefell versus Hodges. And so for the last 8 years, same-sex couples have been able to get married across the country and have their marriages recognized nationwide. Unfortunately, in 2022, we saw that the current U.S. Supreme Court has been making it a habit of repealing their previous decisions. And Justice Alito and Justice Thomas have specifically said that they want to repeal their decision in Obergefell as well, leaving it up to the states to decide what to do in the case in same-sex marriage cases. Now, this hasn't happened yet, but we know that we're expecting this to come down the pipeline sometime in the next year or so, or in the future. And so we are taking a proactive approach and working to repeal this ban from our Constitution before it ever becomes a problem. And so the amendment that's in the Constitution that bans same-sex marriage is Amendment 43. But this fall, you will be voting on Amendment J to repeal that ban from our Constitution. Because we're only repealing language from the Constitution, we actually only need 50% plus one vote to repeal that language from the Constitution. If we were to add any language, then we would need 55% plus one vote, which is what our friends at the abortion campaign are doing, for example, with Coloradans for protecting reproductive freedom. And so from now until Election Day, our job is to increase awareness about Amendment J and to tell Colorado voters to vote yes on Amendment J to repeal that ban from the Constitution. We know that Coloradans are with us, and based on polling and our conversations with people on the ground, we know that Coloradans want to continue to protect the LGBTQ community in our state. What we're struggling with and what we're working towards and what our efforts are going to do from now until November 5th is to increase awareness to let people know that one, there's a ban in our Constitution, and two, that they have a chance to remove this ban on marriage by voting yes on Amendment J. And so we are doing tabling events. I feel like I've maybe met some of you during Durango Pride. We have an organizer in Durango, Atticus, who I think he put his information in the chat who you can reach out to about events. We are also doing phone banks every Tuesday and Thursday. So if you're interested in getting involved, I can send that information to Karen to send out to everyone. But yeah, I will pause there and see if there's any questions from folks. Our measure is more of the straightforward ones compared to other ones.
Thank you. That was right on time. I put in the chat that the ACLU, the Colorado State Dems, and the Legal Women Voters for the state are all in favor of this repealing this language. So yes on J.
Correct. Yeah, we have over 250 endorsers, and that includes businesses, nonprofit organizations, and progressive organizations. Faith leaders, we have over 80 faith leaders and faith communities that endorse the campaign. And then that also includes elected officials. So yeah, I'll put our website in the chat. Are there other questions or comments or thoughts that folks have?
Good. I think we can move on.
Awesome.
I hate to
Thank
cut you
you.
off like that, but I think, yes, it's a good one. We started off with a good one.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you very much, you guys. Again, I apologize. My screen shows that you're seeing everything, and I suspect your screen is not seeing that. The next person we have, we're going to have somebody else try the magic screen share. Representative Karen McCormick, who is out of Boulder, I believe, Karen, and who is a professional veterinarian, is here to discuss Proposition 129, whether or not to establish veterinary professional associates. Sounds great on the surface. I know that Karen has a few concerns that she would like to share with us, and we'd like to talk with you also about it from a very rural point of view. So take it away.
All right. Thank you very much for, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. This is a potentially confusing proposition that's on the ballot. I am Karen McCormick. I live in Longmont, so I like to differentiate myself from Boulder because Longmont is quite different than Boulder, but I am in Boulder County. And I have been a veterinarian for 40 years, so it is my passion. It's what I dedicated my life to, but now I'm fortunate enough to be a state representative. And I want to tell you about Proposition 129, what it actually will do, what it is, what it's about, and the dangers that are present, particularly for companion animals, and who's behind the measure, and what are the cost implications. So this proposition would create an entirely new position called a veterinary professional associate, or VPA, for a job that presently does not exist anywhere in the nation or on planet Earth. There are currently no training programs existing for VPAs at this time. There is a proposed program at CSU that is very much like more like a certificate program. It is a master's degree that is mostly online training with very little hands-on training, with only one semester being in person. The training that has been proposed for this position is entirely inadequate for the duties that this VPA would be allowed to do legally, which is to diagnose some things, to initiate treatment plans, and be able to perform surgery. And realizing that we have veterinarians that do the diagnosing, prescribing, initiating treatment, and doing surgery. And we have veterinary technicians and veterinary tech specialists that really do all of the it's really a team approach to delivering veterinary care across our state and nation. And this new position really would tend to overlap with all the folks that are already working in this space. There are several ways that this position puts pets in danger, and it's during diagnosis where perhaps they will not have enough training to fully be able to discern all the potential differential diagnoses that are on the animal in front of them, and consequently not develop the correct treatment plans. Legally, there is preemptive law at the FDA level that will not allow them to do any prescribing, and that is not going to change because the FDA specifically limits prescribing of medication in animals only to licensed veterinarian, and that is to protect human health and safety and our food safety systems. Even the use of antimicrobials in pets can potentially dilute the ability for those medications to work if there's a public health emergency or crisis. So FDA is not going to change that law. So this person would not be able to not be able to prescribe, and would be inherently tied to a veterinarian for that prescriptive authority. I'm watching the clock. The other part is that this is potentially really a danger to the students that will be taking on $50,000 to $80,000 in debt to complete this master's degree. Those are numbers that we got straight from those developing this master's program, for a job position that doesn't exist, and there's no economic analyses that show us that there will be a job or the earning potential to pay off their debt. So we, across the state, veterinarians, veterinary technicians, business owners, the large animal folks know that this won't help them, are really strongly opposed to this measure that has not come organically through the people that do care and work on animals across our state. So we in Boulder County as Dems did vote to oppose this position. And if you all in La Plata County are thinking about that, I would encourage you to join us in voting to oppose this proposition.
Really good. Thank you so much, Karen, for that overview. I think there might be questions from the audience. The number one concern I know that I have been hearing from people is we have very few veterinarians here in a rural area, and an awful lot of animals. And I know we have a couple of people on the call who have firsthand experience of this, and we're concerned people can't get in for like days and weeks at a time, which when you have a sick pet doesn't work. How does this either help or not help that situation?
So this won't help that situation, but what we've just done and just passed this past spring, that the governor signed this spring, that will start to kind of get into place over the months and years to come. We just passed two great bills that will increase access to care by expanding the scope of practice to our veterinary technicians, our veterinary technician specialists, so they can take on more duties within a practice, relieving the veterinarian of some of the things that vet techs are already educated, credentialed, and skilled to do, but have not been legally allowed to do. We passed that bill with overwhelming bipartisan support. We also legally defined and expanded the use of veterinary telehealth, teletechnologies, telemedicine, in a legal way that keeps us in line with the FDA. So those two bills really were crafted over the last 3 years to address access to care, and open up the ability to have more appointment spaces in our local clinics, but also in a way to help us help our large animal vets too. We don't have enough large animal veterinarians. The VPA will not take the place of the large animal vet for our food production and folks in rural areas. We really do need more veterinarians, and that's also in the work. More seats are happening in vet schools, and more vet schools are opening across our nation. Good question.
So a couple of people have written in the chat that they're concerned that this is a way to try to protect the primary veterinarian from impact to their finances, really, and cite nurse practitioners as an example, or I think of as nurse anesthesiologists as well. Can you talk to that?
Yes, I can. And I will flip that around because and I've been called a protectionist, and I owned it at the General Assembly when I was called that. My protection is the oath I took to animal health and welfare. So yes, I'll be a protectionist all day long, but ultimately my goal is to that animal and not necessarily to anything else. I'm not being paid to be here today. I'm a free agent on the Vote No campaign. The issue behind this is this particular position will save the larger corporate-owned practices money. If they could have one veterinarian and 4 veterinary professional associates under them, it would absolutely save on their bottom line profit margin. I own my own practice. I understand that if I were to hire one of these folks instead of a veterinarian, I'd still have to hire 2 vet techs to go along with that VPA, because every veterinarian or anybody needs 2 technicians to get their work done. But in reality, if that person can't prescribe, I'm constantly tethered to that person, and how well will they do in supporting our clients and treating animals when I cannot be completely removed of the responsibility of following up on all their work. I would be better served hiring a veterinarian, 2 more vet techs, and then they're free to do their job, and so am I, and that therefore we serve our community better and serve the animals better. I see there's been no economic analyses that show that this position would lower the cost of care to the consumer. No studies whatsoever, and we can't figure out how it would benefit anyone but the larger corporations that are looking to cut back on payroll expenses. And that's the money I've found that's behind this. We have found.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I'm afraid we do have to move on.
Yep, thank
but
you.
We really appreciate you a lot, Representative. Thank you for being here.
You bet.
Okay, we're going to try this one more time. I literally was on Zoom last night doing the same thing, and it was no problem at all. And I was able to share my screen without any problem. And I've got a couple of people in the background who I'm working with trying to make this work, and it's not happening. So let's go on to our next speaker. I apologize for that. It's going to be Sean Murray, who is our district attorney. Welcome, Sean. And he is going to be discussing several issues. He's going to be discussing the first, Amendment H, judicial discipline. The next one he'll be discussing is Amendment I, a bail exception, parole eligibility, and then law enforcement funding. And he has thoughts on all of those, as well as some judicial retention. So why don't you go ahead and if you would start sharing your screen.
Can you see my screen? Yes, okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Murray, as Ann said. Thanks, Ann. Just here to talk about a couple of the ballot initiatives. The first one is an exception to the constitutional right to bail. I've got up on my screen here just the language of the constitutional amendment that talks about when there's an exception to the right to bail. Historically, what prosecutors do on first-degree murder cases is they ask for a no bail. And then the defendant, once that happens, has a right to what we call a proof evident presumption great hearing. And this is a procedural protection that makes sure that if somebody's being held without bail, that the judge agrees that the proof is evident and the presumption is great, that the defendant has committed a deliberate murder and has done so intentionally. And so historically, we have a preliminary hearing with that proof evident presumption gray hearing. It affords defendants a right to that procedural protection. If the court doesn't agree that the proof is evident, the presumption is great, then the court sets a cash bail. In 2023, the Colorado Supreme Court said, wait, capital offense in 1A means death penalty, and we don't have the death penalty anymore. So you can't have no bail for first degree deliberate murder. And so what ended up happening in practice was prosecutors started to argue for tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in bail, which was the functional equivalent of no bail. We have several cases here where people are being held with $5 million cash only. I believe there's a case in Boulder with $100 million cash only, which is, again, the same thing as a no bail hold. People can't post $100 million cash. And so essentially what's happened is defendants have lost that procedural protection to having the judge make a finding about how strong the case is in those first degree murder cases. The other instances where defendants can be held without bail are when they commit what's called a crime of violence. So that means you cause serious bodily injury, or you used a deadly weapon, or you possessed and threatened the use of a deadly weapon. The first exception is when a defendant is on parole or probation for a crime of violence and they commit a crime of violence, they can be held without bail. If they're on bail for a crime of violence and there's probable cause, again, a procedural protection from the courts that they committed the crime of violence, then they can be held without bail. Or if they have 2 prior felony convictions or 1 prior felony conviction for a crime of violence, and the new crime is a crime of violence. Basically, it's meant to target individuals that are very dangerous and that danger is clear to the courts, that they be held without bail. So I'm strongly encouraging people to vote yes on this. One, it protects the community from people where the courts have said, yes, they've committed a deliberate, intentional homicide. But 2, it also protects defendants' rights in giving that judicial scrutiny, making sure that defendants are not being held without bail unless a judge has made that finding that the case is just that strong. Unfortunately, if it doesn't pass, prosecutors will continue to argue for very high cash bails, which strips defendants of that right. And it's sort of what we call a legal fiction, meaning nobody's really posting those bonds, and it's had a negative effect on defendants having that right to that hearing. I'm also encouraging people to vote yes on Amendment H. This is sort of, as I understand it, a compromise. Essentially, everyone within the General Assembly and the judicial branch agree that there should be some sort of independent board to assess ethical complaints against judges. I know that's kind of been a hot button issue lately with some of the Supreme Court of the United States justices sort of engaging in misconduct and not really having any kind of oversight to their misbehavior. But this is one of those things where it seems clear to just about everybody that we should be voting yes to ensure that there's independent review of complaints against judges, but also it increases the transparency. So typically we would not know what the complaint against a judge is unless it was founded. And this will change that to where we will know what the complaint is prior to there being any kind of finding of ethical misconduct. I think everybody should agree that transparency in government, whether it's judicial or a different branch, is a positive thing. So again, voting yes on Amendment H is what I'm recommending. I'm also recommending yes on Proposition 128. We don't have what some courts or some states call truth in sentencing. So oftentimes when prosecutors meet with victims, we're sort of guessing at when a defendant will be released. It sort of depends on a number of variables. There's a thing called good time. There's a thing called earn time. And oftentimes people who have committed pretty serious violent offenses are being released, and victims are sort of shocked at the time that they're getting released, either to a halfway house or to parole, well short of the midpoint of their sentences when you add that good time and earn time together. This just targets specific types of very serious offenses, including second-degree murder, first-degree assault, which is when you cause serious bodily injury with a deadly weapon, kidnapping, sexual assault, first-degree arson, first-degree burglary. It gets us closer to what we would call truth in sentencing, in that they're going to serve 85% of their sentence before they're released back into the community. And again, targeting recidivist offenders, if you have 2 prior crime of violence convictions and you're sentenced for one of those crimes of violence that I've just enumerated, then you would serve 100% of your sentence. So I think this really just boils down to keeping the community safe from people that have established themselves as recidivist violent offenders. So I would encourage you to vote yes on Proposition 128. Lastly, I would encourage you to vote no on Prop 130. I don't mean to upset my friends in law enforcement. I generally have a really good working relationship with our partners in law enforcement. The problem with this is it's essentially converting the voters into an appropriations committee. I don't know where this $350 million is going to come from. Typically, that kind of appropriations are handled by the appropriations committee. And it's concerning to me that we're sort of doing an end run around our legislature. And there's concerns within law enforcement that the legislature is anti-police or things of that nature. I want us to properly invest in law enforcement for retention and for attracting new hires. But I think that this is the wrong procedure, the wrong way of going about getting that done. I think it needs to be done by the legislature. They need to appropriate the funds and make sure we're not taking money away from other areas that need it badly as well. So I would encourage you to vote no on Prop 130. Lastly, I'll just say, for appellate judges and the Supreme Court of Colorado justices, I would encourage you all to vote yes to retain all of them. These are extremely qualified, very competent judges and justices. And I've published here, basically, they have what's called a performance or retention commission, and these individuals evaluate these judges and their performances. It was unanimous for all of the judges that are on the ballot and all of the justices on the ballot that they should be retained based on those evaluations. So I'm encouraging everyone to vote yes on every appellate judge and justice. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good, Sean. Thank you very much. I might add that Kristen Champagne and Phil Weiser agreed with you. Congratulations on judicial retentions. They say it's a good crew of people. There are a huge number of them on the ballot here in La Plata, and I know other counties as well. So thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stop Sean's screen and have Mary Dodd try to share her screen more successfully than I am doing. Hopefully that will be the case. Yay, Mary Dodd. Thank you very much. Okay, the next amendment that we're going to be talking about is Amendment 80. Beatriz Garcia is going to be addressing that. This is a Trojan horse, in my opinion, but Beatriz, go ahead and let's talk about your opinion.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if here is Jen. Maybe no, I don't see her comment. If you can unmute yourself. If not, I'll just go ahead and.
Hello.
Are you there?
Oh, it's because I sent her my link. I beg
Sorry,
your pardon.
I'm also having a bad text. Oh, no, I
God.
came on a little. Let's see. Okay. Oh, and I'm coming on as not myself.
You're coming on as me.
I'm
I
Jen.
apologize.
I'm not Ann. I'm not you. Just kidding. Yeah, of course, that's fine. Let me see if I can get my screen shared.
We have not invited you to
But I
be
can
a
also
co-host. We did not know you wanted to be a
Okay, I can
co-host,
just-
Jen. Talk us through it if you can.
Yeah, of course. That's no problem. So as you just said, for Prop 80, we really believe it to be a Trojan horse. The language on its own seems simple. It says it's a school choice for their language amendment, and it seems very reasonable, and that it's just it's affirming or giving more autonomy to parents to choose schools. However, we know that parents in Colorado have had the right to school choice since the 90s, so for over 30 years. And in fact, Colorado, for better or worse, is one of the friendliest places for school choice. Has a long-standing history, right? And so even though 80 kind of uses some language maybe people who fight for public schools are familiar with, we believe it's a bit co-opted, because when we look at the people who are behind this measure and the history of things that they have brought before us, both at local levels and the statewide ballot measure process, these are the same actors who are pro-voucher, right? So that's the risk, that's the Trojan horse. And then another thing that's perhaps less obvious is, because of the way it's written and how many unknowns in the impact, there could also be more justification for things like censorship as in book bans, right? And we already know the dangers of that. I'm happy to talk more about those, but I have a feeling I'm preaching to the choir with this audience. So in addition to the risk of siphoning off public funds into private schools, we also have the risk of legitimizing or providing a legitimate pathway for that level of extremism in the public schools that we are already seeing. And so those are our issues with it. That's why we are saying no, and a ton of other groups that you're probably familiar with.
It sounds like a really good move. I know that. I appreciate that very much. This is, you're right. You know your audience with this group. I think we're all very concerned. We've had, whatever the group is called, Moms for Liberty or whatever they're called, tried to take over several of our school systems. They've tried in almost every major town in the area. So we've fought them off consistently, which has been really nice. And I think that you'll find everybody here is supportive of school choice, but not with the tax dollars and the implication for public dollars going to private and religious schools. Okay, thank you very much for joining us. Sorry I wasn't able to screen share with you too, but okay, we're going to go on to the next, unless somebody in the audience has a specific, Moms for Liberty, yes. Any other specific concerns or questions? Barbara McLaughlin did weigh in and say that it is, of course, supported. Amendment 80 is supported by the Awful Project 2025. Enough reason to say no right there. So thank you very much for attending. And there are going to be a couple of other questions and amendments coming your way. But we're going to move on right now to abortion. And I've got at this point, if we could move to the next slide, Abortion Amendment 79, which most of us probably signed the petition for to get on the ballot. La Plata County was one of the first, District 6, I think it is, and La Plata County led that with people like Barb Day at the forefront. Thank you very much, Barb, here in the audience today, working very hard. Can you move forward, Mary, on the slide to the next slide?
I'm not able to, so I'll have to go out of screen share and go back into screen share to do it.
This is
for some
just
reason.
being
I'm sorry.
weird. No, Mary, it's something is really wrong. I've never, I guess, tried to share a PowerPoint before, and it just does not work well.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's so odd. So let me fix that. And sorry, everybody.
Okay, that sounds great. Meanwhile, we are going to have Beatriz, I believe, begin the conversation on that, or Lori Menninger. And welcome both of you, ACLU and League of Women Voters, to very reputable sources. Thank you. Who would like to kick off?
Beatriz, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Jen, you want to take this one?
Oh, Jen Samano, back. Sorry about that, Jen.
Did you miss me? No, I'm just kidding. I just talked. So, Laura, do you wanna kick us off the league? Do you like this little circle? I could do it too.
Sure.
But I figure you probably could.
Sure.
Cool.
In our positions, pretty straightforward. And in this, for instance, just echo Anne's comments, a shout out to the many league members around the state and here in La Plata County who got out and gathered the signatures to get this ballot measure on the ballot. I think it's helpful maybe to just have a little bit of background. So back in 1984, voters approved a constitutional amendment that became Section 50 of Article 5 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, which forbade, public funding for abortion services, which obviously then prohibits the use of Medicaid funds for abortion services, even if doing so threatens patients' health or whether it's clear if there's fetal danger. So I think there's two things to think about in this particular measure. One is that it would repeal Section 50 of Article 5 and add Section 32 to the Article 2, and the language is straight out of the ballot measure. So it would read, abortion, the right to abortion is hereby recognized Government shall not deny, impede, or discriminate against the exercise of that right, including prohibiting health insurance coverage for abortion. Historically, the League supports policies that protect the constitutional rights of privacy of individuals to make reproductive choices. And we believe that public policy in a pluralistic society must affirm the constitutional rights of privacy of individuals to make those choices. The current statute prohibiting the use of state funds for abortions discriminates against economically disadvantaged women, as well as women who are employed by state or local governments and have health insurance through their employment. And as a position, the League opposes any law that prohibits access to abortion based on insurance non-coverage. So I'm going to stop there and I'll turn it over to Beatrice.
I'm going to act as her proxy.
Sorry, Jen. I'm sorry.
I think.
Yeah.
No, I know. No, it's good. It's a good problem to have. There's overwhelming support we're seeing across the nation for abortion rights. And then, of course, we're seeing the backlash. And I think the only thing I would add, which again, preaching to the choir, from an ACLU perspective, is really just the overall importance of making our state a safe haven for civil liberties and civil rights, no matter what happens, including having the proactive, assertive response during the interregnum period. We have to bring the clunky Latin, but in all seriousness, the period after Election Day and through inauguration, right? So when we're looking at where our spheres of control and really looking at this ballot, while there's a lot to oppose, Amendment J, between J and 79, like these are super important, including defending. And we also have already seen the impacts, causing people to need to travel regionally. And so the importance of making us, again, a regional safe haven for abortion and many other things. That's what we have to do. And I also always think with abortion, we are one of the first states to legalize abortion, like their thing. So we've got to get through it and make sure people know, because they sometimes think they've already done it.
Okay, very good, Jen. Thank you for those comments. I appreciate your time being here again. Okay, the next up is trophy hunting. And I think you guys can see the screen. Yay, good job, Mary Dodd. Trophy hunting is really interesting. We have a gentleman here named Matt Barnes, who was in way out back Canada last week when he agreed to speak. Very kind of you to join us, Matt. He's with Shining Horizons Land Management. He's also with one of the conservation groups, and I didn't catch that much on his voicemail, who else he's representing or what other positions he knows about. Matt is here to talk to us about the pros and cons. It's not something he says he has a deeply held opinion about one way or the other, but let's hear what Matt has to say.
Hey, everybody. Can you see and hear me yet?
Yes. Hi.
Great.
Hi, Matt.
And
we can.
I'm going to try and share my screen. If I can
Oh, you
figure out
are?
how.
Okay. Hold on just a second. That's going to take just a moment. I didn't know you needed that. Sorry about that. Good job.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, good.
Okay, cool. We'll just go with it like this. I'm afraid if I put it in presentation mode, something will get messed up. Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Matt Barnes. I live in Dolores. And I'm slowly making my way back from Canada through Montana and Wyoming. Just saw half a dozen grizzly bears and a dozen wolves, which I'm excited about. But in my real life, I work for the Northern Rockies Conservation Cooperative, and I work primarily on reducing human-carnivore conflict and promoting coexistence with animals that are sometimes problematic for us, like wolves now in Colorado, grizzly bears in the Northern Rockies. And so anyways, I'll just go through what we're calling the CATS initiative. CATS is actually a acronym for Cats Aren't Trophies, which is the outfit that's put this on the ballot. The actual title is Prohibit Hunting of Mountain Lion, Bobcat, and Lynx Initiative. And so basically, the question is, shall there be a change to the statute that would A, prohibit hunting mountain lions, lynx, and bobcats? And then this would also define what, quote, trophy hunting means. And then also, and there are exemptions for, protecting human life, property, and livestock. And it would establish hunting or trapping any of these animals as a class 1 misdemeanor with increasing fines and limiting license privileges. So basically, if you're convicted of illegally hunting or trapping, you would lose your basically your right to hunt and fish for some time. So this is supported by Cats Aren't Trophies, or CATS. That includes outfits like Animal Wellness Action, the Mountain Lion Foundation, and the Wild Animal Sanctuary, and opposed by outfits like, I believe this is the campaign against the initiative is called Colorado's Wildlife Deserve Better. And the main players in that are the Colorado Trappers and Predator Hunters Association, Safari Club International, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Colorado Wildlife Federation. And so essentially all the hunting and fishing based conservation organizations are opposed, while the more sort of animal welfare based conservation organizations are in support of this initiative. So a quote from Samantha Miller, who is the CATS campaign manager. She says, "This is an opportunity to stop the inhumane, unsporting killing of mountain lions and bobcats for their heads and their coats. This is commercial killing with lion hunting guides charging $8,000 to guarantee someone a trophy, and trappers are selling bobcat pelts to China." The opposing view, and this is from Dan Gates, who's, many of you know, he wears a couple hats, but Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management and also the Colorado Trappers and Predator Hunters Association. It's not always clear where one of these begins and the other one starts, but this would be the very traditional version of wildlife management. So he says it would strip away the very foundation of science-based wildlife management and therefore deprive Colorado's wildlife managers and the sporting community of their rights to manage, pursue, and harvest these well-regulated species. So you might be wondering how many of these cats actually live in Colorado. There's about 4,000 mountain lions, mostly in the Western Mountains. They're considered a big game species. We hunt about 500 of them a year, and that's about a 12% harvest, if you will. Hunters are supposed to target adult males. That doesn't always happen, and in actuality, the harvest is really 47% female, so very close to half and half. And probably one of the big things I want to point out that there's no evidence whatsoever that hunting mountain lion reduces any kind of conflict with people or livestock. That's one of the arguments that people who don't want this to pass resort to, but there's no evidence for that at all. Canada lynx they're an endangered species, so they're not hunted right now. They were reintroduced a couple decades ago by CPW in Colorado. It was actually one of the first state-led reintroductions of any endangered species anywhere. And there's now somewhere between 150 to 250 of them, with a large proportion of those in the San Juan Mountains. So this initiative would codify that Canada lynx cannot be hunted. So if they are ever removed from the federal endangered species list, the state could not then change them to either a big game or fur bearer species unless they went back to the state legislature. And then bobcats are actually very abundant. We think there's about 12,000 of them in Colorado, and they're actually abundant basically throughout the lower 48. They're considered a fur bearer species, and through hunting and box trapping, they're almost 900 per year get removed, and that's about a 7% harvest rate. So neither that 12% nor that 7% are thought to be excessive in terms of how many can be removed sustainably. There's some debate about that, but most of the evidence is that all three of these populations are stable to slowly increasing in Colorado right now. So this is where mountain lions live, in the dark green. So there are some east of the divide, but most west. This is where, this is a little bit out of date now, but I think it's still roughly accurate where we think that the lynx mostly are. And you can see that the San Juans are kind of the stronghold for lynx. And again, remember, there's only about 200 of these, and so I don't think they'll be hunted anytime soon, regardless of what happens with this initiative. So to me, I would say this is not really a biology question. This is a policy question. It's should we do this? It's how should we relate to another species that we share this landscape with? It's an animal welfare issue. It's basically, when you get down to it, it's about trophy hunting. The people behind this initiative find the whole idea of trophy hunting obnoxious, and so do a lot of people. And again, I would just emphasize that one of the big arguments against this is coming from people who just want to preserve the sport hunting tradition, and they'll say things like hunting mountain lions reduces conflicts with people and livestock. There's no evidence whatsoever that that's the case. There are some concerns, though, and this probably one of the big ones is that this would remove the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission's authority to manage these species. And of course, they're a very traditional organization because the profession is traditional. By traditional in this sense, I mean tending to view wildlife as a resource to be harvested by people, to be managed by people. And so oftentimes when people say manage, they mean hunt, fish, trap, etc. So a lot of biologists, because of that, are opposed because they think that they should be in charge of it, as they always have been. But we should remember that wildlife biology as a profession, and most of the biologists who work for agencies like Colorado Parks and Wildlife, are really steeped in a culture of hunting and fishing. And so in that way, they're not often representative of all Coloradans. In fact, only about 5% of adult Coloradans hold big game hunting licenses every year. I am one of those. And that's numbers maybe more like 10% if you count all hunting and fishing licenses. So most people in Colorado are not hunting or trapping, but there's a lot of evidence that most people in Colorado support other people's right to hunt and fish. Trapping is a little bit less supported. There's probably less than 50% of Coloradans support trapping of basically any kind. And when you ask people whether they support these sort of things, it really depends a lot on the language. Most people react negatively to the phrase trophy hunting, but it's important to note that there is no widely accepted definition of trophy hunting. It's one of those things that's kind of in the eye of the beholder. Or some people would say it's like pornography, you know it when you see it, but it's hard to define. This initiative would put a definition into statute, and that is concerning to a lot of people. A lot of folks in the hunting and fishing world see this as a slippery slope. Even though most hunters have no interest in trapping, most hunters even have no interest in predator hunting. For example, I have no interest in predator hunting. I just hunt deer and elk. But the hunting community at large tends to see things like this as a slippery slope that could eventually reduce all hunting opportunities over time, as one thing follows another, essentially. So that's essentially the issue. As a yes vote basically would mean no more mountain lion hunting, no more bobcat trapping in Colorado, and a no vote would leave things as they are. So that's all I got.
Okay, Matt, thank you very much. Good comments. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Of course, concern about trapping, causing suffering, killing so many mountain lion females jeopardizes the cubs, and knowledge about food sources. And the female can't teach the cubs because it does take more than a few months. I mean, they're a multi-year process to raise a family of cubs, right?
Right.
Yeah, so if you lose that, yeah, that is a concern of some. How would the amendment, the supports, I can't see that question. How would amendment monies to support wildlife? I'm sorry, the thing isn't, God, my computer. Can somebody else read this for me? This
You got
support
it.
money?
Deb is just asking, how would this support, it's a proposition, not an amendment first. How would
I'm
support money-
sorry, I said it wrong. How would a yes vote on this or supporting this, how would this affect monies that are available now to support wildlife?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it would have some effect. It wouldn't be huge because, I mean, not that many people are actually hunting mountain lions, and the sale of hunting licenses for mountain lions is really not that high relative to other income streams that Colorado Parks and Wildlife has. But it is true that the majority of funding for the agency, CPW, comes from hunting and fishing revenues, but the biggest contributors to that are really elk hunting, and especially out-of-state elk hunting. So, because remember, most of us are not out there hunting mountain lions, so that's a really small proportion of people in the state that are actually doing that. And so it's not a ton of income relative to, what it costs to actually manage wildlife in the state.
Very good. Thank you very much, Matt. I sure appreciate it. I think that we need to move on in the interest of time, but that was fascinating. Thank you for weighing in from wherever you are right now. Go pet a grizzly and have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate that.
No,
Okay, the
it's nice
next
to meet you all, too.
conversation. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate your time. The next conversation we're going to have is about ranked choice voting. This is controversial. Speaking for myself, I have been a proponent of ranked choice voting in theory for at least 20 years now, maybe 30. That said, I hear there's some really severe concerns about this particular proposition, the way it's written and by whom it's written. So I would like to hear first from the ACLU, Lori, and then I would like to hear a pure Democrat's point of view, Mary Dodd, chair of Montezuma, who is helping us with our slideshow because I evidently couldn't figure it out. So let's go ahead and we will have.
And I wanted, oh, thanks, Matt. Okay, I just needed, yeah, there we go. Sorry. All right. Is that good enough?
Okay, so Lori, why don't you go ahead and kick off while she's loading her screen?
Sure. Thanks. And I think, Ann, you gave me honorary membership in the ACLU, which I love that. But
I beg your pardon. League of Women Voters. I'm so sorry. I
League of
apologize.
Women Voters.
I'm so sorry. I have it right on the script. I'm a little behind today because of my technical problems. I'm not paying attention. Anyway, thank you.
No problem. Admittedly, there is a lot of conversation across the state right now about this issue. And I think it might be helpful to give a little bit of context as far as how the league came to its position, which is in favor of this proposition. So in the 2023-2024 legislative session, about 70 different citizen-initiated ballot measures that were modeled on this idea of Final Four voting were considered. And that model is what was used successfully in Alaska in 2022. So of all of the initiatives that passed various procedural hurdles in the session, proponents settled on the one that is now this proposition, Proposition 131. If enacted, or if approved, the effective date of the proposition would be January 1st of 2026. However, making this even more complicated is that the effective date of Section 54 of Senate Bill 24210 is March 1st of 2026, which would be before any 2026 primary or general elections would occur under Proposition 131. Senate Bill 24210 requires that a diverse group of 12 different municipalities conduct an instant runoff voting election and a post-election risk limiting audit before instant runoff voting could be used in any elections for state or federal offices. So when Governor Polis signed SB 24210, he vowed to respect the will of the voters if Proposition 131 passes, and then to work with the legislature to implement Prop 131 no later than 2028. So that's kind of some technical background. And I want to say just sort of how the league comes to its position. So as an organization, we base all of our positions on extensive study by leagues, league member experts, and thoughtful exploration of all sides of an issue and their impact. So ranked choice voting or alternative voting methods is something that we've been studying here in Colorado for over a decade with about 40 volunteers doing research and analysis on the issues. So it's not a decision that the league has come to lightly to support this particular proposition. And it comes too from our national positions that we have two of related to this. One, our position on voter representation and electoral systems, where the league supports, electoral methods that encourage voter participation and voter engagement, encourages those with minority opinions to participate, promotes access to voting, and maximizes effective votes and minimizes wasted votes. And the second piece of our position has to do with voting methods specifically, where the league supports authorizing and implementing alternatives to plurality voting that allow people to express their preferences more effectively. And in the opinion of the league, that's what Proposition 131 would do. So it would amend the Constitution to create an all-candidate primary election for certain state and federal offices where the top 4 candidates advance to the general election and allow voters to rank those candidates in the general election. If passed, the proposition would affect a number of elections, and rather than tell you what they all are, it's easier to say which ones it would not impact. It would not apply to the election for the office of the U.S. President, district attorneys, or local government offices. We think that Proposition 131 is appropriate as a statutory change and not a constitutional change, because that would allow the legislature to pass bills to improve it if needed over time. And under the current system, the primary is often a decisive election, and partisan primaries purposely exclude voters. Primary elections typically have low voter turnout, and we think that democracy is best achieved through more voter participation. And we think that by allowing all voters, regardless of party affiliation, to participate in both the primary and the general elections, and by making a competitive general election the decisive election, all voters will be empowered. If 2 candidates from the same dominant party compete against each other in the general election, we think the contest is likely to be more engaging for voters accustomed to the current safe for one party elections. We recognize that there is a cost to the state and to counties to implement a new voting system, but believe that this change would result in allowing voters to express their preferences more effectively. And lastly, as you pointed out, Anne, in the introduction, there's some controversy. There's complicated language in this proposition. And I think that the Blue Book actually does a pretty good job of simply explaining how instant runoff voting works, as does the Secretary of State's website. And of course, we have additional information. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to hear from Mary or anyone else. Thanks.
And should I go ahead and just make my points? Uh-oh, I don't know how that happened. Sorry.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
Should-
Just ignore the fact we're not on county lodger's tax yet.
Sorry.
We're still on ranked choice voting.
Yeah,
Mary and Kirby, I believe, here also both attended a discussion by the Colorado State Party, discussed this at length, and they came to a slightly different reasoning, which I think we'd love to hear about.
should I go next, Ann, or do you want Kirby to go?
Yes, please speak up.
Okay, well, I wasn't totally prepared and don't have as much information as you shared, Lori, but there are some, going to give some bullet points. One of the difficulties is that ranked choice voting, this is a constitutional amendment, which does not permit legislators then to respond nimbly and quickly should there be a need, should they find that there are changed circumstances or implementation challenges or any unintended consequences. So in Alaska and Maine, they adopted it by statute without changing the Constitution. So that's one of the main difficulties that I have with it and the Colorado Democratic Party has with it. In Alaska, they have actually found that 1 in 20 voters in Alaska and Maine have improperly marked their ballots, and their ballots have then been discounted. And in a close race, that could be a big problem. Studies have also shown the University of Minnesota Hubert Humphrey School of Public Affairs found that it does not yield more diverse elected officials and actually decreases voter participation due to confusion. It has not decreased negative campaigning. It has created a system in Alaska where single party general elections are not uncommon and candidate recruitment is even more difficult. And thinking about state Senate and House races in rural areas, we have a lot of difficulty recruiting diverse candidates, and we have a great deal of difficulty recruiting Democratic diverse candidates to run. And research believes that the ranked choice voting may actually hurt candidates of color by undermining traditional paths to power for candidates of color in state and in state elections. It does provide structural benefits to minority voters in multi-winner contests like city council races, where multiple seats are up for election. But a city council race is very much like ranked choice voting. It mimics its proportional representation, but no similar structural benefits have been found to exist in single member contests where only one seat is up for election. And there is research to suggest that the combination of ranked choice voting and top 4 primary may actually undermine the success of candidates of color depending upon the circumstances. The other difficulty that the Colorado Democratic Party Central Committee discussed at length were some of the difficulties making sure that risk limiting audits are performed adequately, because this is an entirely new process. And so performing a risk limiting audit would have to be different than the way it's currently performed. And again, going back, the main difficulty that I see is that it locks us into this, and it limits the ability of the legislature to revise any procedures should those be necessary. And that's all.
Thank you. There are several questions in the chat, which I think are interesting. One of them is, ACLU has no stance on this. One of the questions is, or concerns, rich people can campaign or donate to opposition candidates to get them out of the running, and voters don't get a chance to vote on very good candidates. This is what Adam Schiff did to Katie Porter in California. Would either one of you two like to speak to that?
Either one of Lori or me, or
Lori, are you? I'm sorry,
okay.
yes.
Lori, you go ahead.
I think that here in Colorado, one of the things that we know that low turnout for primary elections are disenfranchising Colorado voters. There is not a lot of evidence, or much evidence at all, I'll say, that rich donors are forcing candidates out of a race. I think that with the growing percentage of unaffiliated voters in the state of Colorado, I think voters are speaking for themselves and disassociating themselves from strict party lines. And I think that this kind of ranked choice voting gives people the opportunity to more freely participate in the election system.
I don't
Very
have
good.
any comment for that. So,
Okay. Another question that has come in into the chat box, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of scrolling around here. Maybe Karen can also dive into this. There's a concern. I can't seem to run a video up here. My connection is so slow. County commissioners, deal with it. The Blue Book says it amends the Colorado statutes, not a change to the Constitution, and it is a proposition. Is that not correct? So I believe that is correct.
It is a proposition. It is a statute.
It's a
It would be
proposition.
change. It amends the Colorado statute. It is not a constitutional amendment.
thanks.
So
for
there would be slight variation. There would be some tweaking allowed as if we
Correct.
find out it's a total cluster. Okay, that sounds good. Are there any election financing regulations included to create a more even playing field? No.
Unfortunately, not
No.
in this particular proposition.
Okay. Okay, very good. That's kind of what I expected. Thank you both very much. This is going to be the hardest issue for me, for sure. No question there. I appreciate your time, both of you. Thank you very much. Mary, don't leave. I need you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not leaving. I just wanted to say that it's estimated that the costs to the state will increase $100,000 the first year and about $6 million a year in future years. And counties will bear enormous costs because they'll have to print and mail multiple ballots. They'll have to update voting systems. They'll have to educate voters and provide additional training for staff and election judges. And the cost to counties, it's estimated, could increase by about $5 million for the primary and up to $4 million for the general. The state will bear some of that cost, but when we're looking at some of the budget deficits in the state, one wonders where the additional money to make all of those changes will come from.
Okay, very good. Thank you both very much for your insight and for the time you've taken studying the issue. We appreciate that. We are now going to move to 2 La Plata measures. And then at the end, we're going to hit very briefly on 4 issues that basically are tax questions also. And I'm just going to run through those quickly at the end. No, go back up, Mary. Up to 9R bond, please. Oops. Or are you doing it, or Rick, did you finally get in and can you screen share now?
I think I might be able to.
Okay, why
I'm
don't
Rick
you try to
Peterson.
screen share? Good.
Okay, I'll
Thank
give it
you.
a try here. I'm Rick Peterson, and I'm one of your school board directors, but in this capacity, I'm just a citizen in the community because that's the way the law works. I'm also acting as treasurer for the citizens, Durango Citizens for Great Schools, the bond support committee. And I've got our excellent community outreach chairperson, Jean Orr, here with me. Jean, do you want me to run through the slides? You have something to share here at this time? How do you want to do this?
You go right ahead. You do such a fantastic job, Rick. I'll defer to you. No problem.
You're kind. You're very kind. Thank you. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay. Does everybody see our logo? The S on 4A? We got it? Joyous. Anyway, okay. So the school board, just to give you a little bit of background, the school board commissioned a long-range planning committee. We met for 12 months last year to evaluate the state of the district as far as facilities, capital improvements, needs, things of that nature. And we decided in August to put a bond measure measure on the local ballot. A bond measure is specifically for capital and infrastructure. It is not the same as a mill levy, which could go for things like salaries. So bond dollars can't be used for salaries. Okay, there we go. This will just give you a kind of a quick overview of all this good stuff. Again, the bottom line is this bond measure will include a tax increase, a small tax increase. And that is because the state of Colorado gives us $0 for community and capital and infrastructure projects. As you can see at the very bottom there, 87% of our per pupil funding goes into staff salaries and benefits just to make it, hopefully try and get quality teachers and allow them to be able to live in this area. So that leaves us very, very little for maintenance and upkeep. Some of you may remember that in 2020, we passed a bond in La Plata County with about 70% support. That was to roll over an existing tax. That was not a tax increase. Okay. So after this long-range committee evaluation, we came up with some facts that the average age of a school building in the district is 43, and that range is anywhere from about 16 to over 70. They all need deferred maintenance, electrical, mechanical, roofing, plumbing, safety fixes. The long-range committee in our facilities research found that just about 10 million is immediately needed. And within 5 years, that goes up to about 84 million. And that's just to maintain things and hopefully do a little bit of innovation to keep up with modern teaching practices. This quickly tells you about our portrait of a graduate, the 6 competencies that we've identified. I'm not going to go too much of that into here, but this bond initiative directly supports that. You can find out more about that on the district website. You can also find our comprehensive strategic plan. We have a 3-year strategic plan laying out all our goals. I would encourage you all to go to the website, or you can get a paper copy at the district offices in Bodo. But again, this shows just the plan that we have for this district. And we're actually just about to begin working with Karen Cheser on the next 3 years. Okay, upgrades. We talked a little bit about this. Really, the important part here is trying to not only do deferred maintenance, but getting more into sustainability and energy projects. On a separate issue, I'm sure many of you have noticed we put a bunch of solar on our schools this year. That was a separate project. It's not under the scope of this bond, but that's the kind of things that we want to do in this district to reduce our carbon footprint and improve our sustainability, and most importantly, lower our costs. Every dollar we save on utilities, we can put back into the major cost we have, which is salaries and benefits. Okay. The big things that this bond would cover. We want to build an elementary school at Three Springs. Florida Mesa area is the one area of the school district where we see significant growth. By doing that, which has been in the works since 2006 when they broke ground at Three Springs, we'd be able to repurpose Florida Mesa. We've got some different ideas. It could be potentially employee housing solutions. It could be consolidating and reducing leases for our IT and facilities department. It could be potentially moving our bus barn out to there and reusing that property on Highway 3. So it's very much let's repurpose, not just tear down and replace or sell things. Another big thing is a lot of our equipment is over 20 years old, and we want to update that and replace it. Unfortunately, in the past, there's really been no plan for replacing equipment in the classrooms. So you'll see that especially at Durango High School, there's a lot of stuff there with a lot of duct tape on it. We need to upgrade that both for safety and for the best classroom experience. And the frank discussion is the fact that teaching methods and learning methods have changed since 20 or 30 years ago. We did an extensive community survey earlier this year. We had about 72% of informed respondents across the school district supporting this based on our priorities. The Board of Education used that information to decide to put this on the November ballot, and Jean and I represent a citizens committee, Durango Citizens for Great Schools, to try and garner yes votes for that. A couple of things that people expressed that they want to make sure we're doing the right way was making sure that the money is spent wisely and having transparency. That being said, all the bond funds from the 2020 bond are always audited in our annual audit for the district, and they're clearly there on the website. But if you've ever read an audit, it can be challenging for a $76 million budget. So we will again have a citizens oversight committee, an independent committee watching how this money is being spent. Obviously, we're going to go for competitive bidding. About 60% of our last bond went directly to local contractors. We would strive to maintain that and even extend it if we can get this passed. We do quarterly reports from our bond committee at public meeting with the school board. All that information is posted on our website. And of course, it's all included in the annual audit, which is independently audited every year for the school district. So how can all you help? Obviously, donations. Money is what makes all these things happen. You can see the address there. Spread the word. We've got signs available at DEM headquarters, as long as throughout a couple other individuals on our campaign. Keep an ear out for our events, town halls, campaigns, and please vote yes and encourage your friends to vote yes, to support our education. It's the bedrock of our community. Any questions? Did I get through that quick enough?
Thank you.
Good job, Pete. Good job, Rick. Does anyone, I'm not seeing questions about this in the chat. So I think that was a great overview and that we probably are good to go at this point. We need to keep going because our technical glitches and so many great speakers have slowed us down a bit. We're now going to discuss 1A, the next slide, which is the county lodgers tax question. I noticed that people in the city of Durango are not getting this question. I don't think, maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't think I saw it on that one ballot. There are 3 different ballots for La Plata County. I'm going to ask the speaker I was expecting, unfortunately, did not show up. I don't see her on the Zoom. So I'm going to ask Marsha Porter Norton and spring this on her and see if she could address that. Oh, you're Heather.
I'm just linked as Beatrice.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll go ahead and rename you. Thank you very much for that. So you're Heather. Good, good. Glad to see you here, Heather. Hawk, right?
And I have to jump off pretty quick, so I would like a minute before Heather takes over, if that's okay with you, Heather.
Yes, go for it.
All right. So right now, what the county commissioners have done, and I would like to note that I believe Commissioner Church and Chairman Salka are on here. What we have done is sent a measure to the ballot to reallocate 70% of the lodgers tax collected in the county. So it is a bit confusing. It's not the tax collected in the city, and therefore city residents will not vote on it. It currently raises $1 million a year, primarily from short-term rentals, such as Airbnb and VRBO. We have had a whole public process this summer and recently voted in the affirmative to send to the ballot the question as to whether, and it's 1A on your local ballot, again, if you live in the county, and Bayfield and Ignacio, because we collect taxes there because they don't have their own taxing district. We would allocate it to housing and childcare. And Heather Hawk is here as the advocate. Next Tuesday, the commissioners will vote on whether we support it. And of course, I'm in 100% and we sent it to the ballot. So that's not going to be surprising if we vote Tuesday to formally endorse and support this. One of the things I want to say is this is not anti-tourism. We know that tourism comprises 30% of our budget. You go down the main streets in Ignacio, Bayfield, and Durango, there are many tourism businesses. What this is pro-worker, pro-parents, pro-families, pro-thriving families, and pro-housing that everybody in our community needs. And so the way it would technically work is we would gather it and allocate through a process that the county would oversee 70% of the current $1 million collected. Now that could fluctuate each year. And we know $700,000 a year isn't going to solve everybody's problem, but we can use it very strategically, can never say that word, to leverage grants, to give scholarships, to help fill slots, to do other kinds of things that will really make a difference. Again, what we hear about 3 to 5 times a week, or I do, is a dire need for more things that will support not only our tourism workforce, but our workforce overall. And Heather is the advocate on this. I can be a more formal advocate after Tuesday, hopefully. But anyway, Heather, I'll turn it over to you, and thanks, everybody.
Okay, I just hijacked your screen. I'm Heather Hawk. I'm a member of the Small Scale Issues Committee for the La Plata County Early Childhood or Childcare for La Plata County. We do have a website available. As Marcia stated, this has been a very comprehensive stakeholder engagement process. We have had many families, childcare workers, teachers, owners, operators, and directors participate in the communication about the impact that permanent and sustainable funding could have on childcare in La Plata County. And so just to give you a little bit of background, the committee was formed to support this voter initiative. We advocated with the Board of County Commissioners and are in favor of reallocation of 70%. The statute allows for reallocation of up to 90%. The Board of County Commissioners has sent this to the voters at a 70% with 30% retained to support tourist marketing at the county level. We want to see, let's see, questions. It is as she said, this is a tax collected by the visitors for short-term rentals and short-term and hotels in the county only. This is not the municipal lodging tax collected by the city of Durango. It will not raise our taxes. This is a tax paid for by our visitors, guests in our hotels, and where it's a response to concerns from the community about the affordability, the capacity of childcare locally, the attainability of housing, and the needs of our local workforce. And so what would an impact of this kind of funding do for the community? It would be an opportunity to address affordability. At this time, families in La Plata County can spend up to 29% of their household income on providing childcare for 2 children under 6. This could provide an income-based tuition assistance program to help address affordability for families that cannot access federal Head Start or county CCAP child care assistance program dollars at this time. We could also support on addressing capacity and increasing capacity in the county. We have a challenge right now that there is only licensed capacity available for 40% of children in the county. And this is particularly dire for children under 12 months, where there is only 80 licensed care slots for infants across all of La Plata County. We would also like to support the child care workforce. Childcare is essential to every industry in our community, and our childcare workforce is a workforce that lives in this community and supports tourism and all of our other critical infrastructure, and they need support as well. They make an average of $31,000 a year, which in this community is less than half of the area median income. And we have about a 42% turnover rate for childcare providers and teachers due to this low compensation. So we've worked very closely with the Regional Housing Alliance to connect the needs of childcare and attainable housing for our workforce, to connect those together. And so in that effort, we are participating in a strategic investment planning process that can help guide the spending and allocation of this funding if the voters approve it. And so we really want to be sure that that all our voters know that this has not been brought to the commissioners with the hopes of defunding tourism. Like Marcia said, what we want is to allow La Plata County to be home to our workforce and to increase the quality of life for citizens in La Plata County by supporting childcare and attainable housing. So how can Well, we have some endorsements and news. We have been endorsed by the Durango Herald and their editorial staff. And please reach out to us. We have a website, we have an email address, and vote for 1A. Yes, it is not going to be on ballot number 2, which is the ballot that will go to residents that live within the city limits, because it would be a conflicting tax question for those that have voted on the municipal lodging tax, but it will go out to the remainder of residents in La Plata County, Bayfield, Ignacio, and those outside of the Durango city limits.
Really good. Thank you so much, both of you, for your overview of all that. That's great. I'm sorry, we're running late because we have a lot of folks. The rest of this will not take long. We do have one more speaker who I would really love to have a chance to speak up. It's Representative, and I'm going to kill your name, I'm afraid. Representative Meg
Froelich.
Froelich. Thank you very much. I apologize for that.
No worries.
We'd love to have you speak to Proposition KK, the firearms and ammunition excise tax.
Yeah,
we're going to look at that one first, and then we'll go hit the others quickly.
Running late. I know you're getting at the end of your
Thank
time,
you.
So I'll just be super speedy, and I can also tell you what I meant. I've been speaking on all the amendments when I go around town because there are just so many, and I think this meeting is illustrative of that. So it's a really difficult ballot where we really a big part of our effort is just going to be to get folks to stick around and vote all of these measures. And you just heard a presentation on some local measures that'll be all the way at the end of the ballot. And so meetings like this are just so important. So so grateful to get a chance to talk. And the other challenging factor is we know from research, the more progressive the voter, the more they feel they need to be informed before they vote. And so when we have a long ballot, it makes it tough for the more progressive ballot measures actually, because people won't vote unless they feel like they have access to information. So much appreciate your time here. I can tell you G basically amends the Homestead Act to include veterans with disabilities. So that one's pretty simple. JJ is we put in a sports betting tax revenue measure, and it's doing better than we thought. It funds water projects. And so they're asking, can we keep the money when we went over? And Prop KK, when we do these ballot measures, we have to say how much revenue is anticipated. And in ours, this is excise tax on firearms and ammunition, which means it is not a consumer tax, although the gun manufacturers and gun dealers could pass that cost on to the consumer if they so chose. And basically the need for this comes from a federal decrease in funding for victim services. So we reached a high in victim services funding of 53 million in 2018. We're down to 13 million in last year. And this is because of changes in the way that the Violence Against Women Act is funded. Every state is suffering this same shortfall in victim services funding. But because of Tabor, where we don't have the ability to keep any of our excess revenue and we return it to taxpayers, we don't have any buffer in our budget because we can only grow by inflation and population. So a state like New York saw this $44 million shortfall and just funds it. Maryland does the same. California passed this same concept of taxing guns and ammo to fund gun violence prevention. They were able to pass that through the legislature. But because of Tabor, we have to take any tax measure to the voters, as you know from today's long presentations. So we are going to the voters to ask for a tax on guns and ammo to fund not only this victim services where we're experiencing this shortfall, but also other we believe, important both creations of gun violence and measures to reduce gun violence in our society, which is youth mental health, veterans mental health, and we of course are experiencing terrible outcomes with veteran suicide. And of course, if the method is by firearm, the fatalities are much higher when a firearm is involved. And then there's a small portion that goes to school safety as well. All aspects of the prevalence of gun violence in our lives and attempts to remedy some of the impacts of gun violence in our society. And I should have taken the time to look up in La Plata exactly where these services, which of the existing nonprofits and services in your county are currently being funded by the federal money that has now declined. But I can tell you that especially hard hit will be the rural counties in the deliverance of these services. In my county, we have one domestic violence shelter. And again, I should have looked up La Plata and I apologize. But they're already kind of hanging by a thread. We've been looking every year, the Majority Leader Duran, who is both a gun owner and a domestic violence survivor. We scramble to find funding for these measures and to fund these nonprofits and victim services in our community. And, the classic looking in the couch cushions. And we reached a high. We were able to find 5 million one year. And it just isn't nearly enough. So this creates a constant revenue stream. And that is it in a nutshell. And I appreciate the time.
We really appreciate your being here, Representative. And thank you also for touching on the other propositions and amendments, G,
I don't know
JJ.
if you have someone talk about marriage equality, which is J.
We did.
Okay.
Yeah. Way up at the top. They kicked off because they had to leave early.
Okay,
so
great.
we've been kind of jumping around the
I
ballot just based on speakers' availability. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Did anyone have questions about any of the other amendments and propositions as far as taxes go for the representative to answer while she's here? If not, we're going to move on to the last one, which is pretty cut and dry from most of our points of view. I'm not seeing anything in the chat for questions. Thank you very much, Representative. The last one is Amendment K, and it has very strong support from everybody, from the Democrats, from our county clerk, Tiffany Lee, who's just like, that extra week would really, really help a lot. They all feel that it would increase their ability to serve voters even better. So it's a pretty cut and dried one, as far as I'm concerned. Anything that will help our county clerks do even better elections than they already do, I personally am all for. Does anyone have any alternative perspective on that, or can we call this a wrap? This basically just extends by 1 week the deadline for certain election filings and publications. So it gives them time to, for instance, count the petition signatures and make sure that the thing is pushed through on time. It does not affect voters in any other way. It just helps them. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. I tell you what, there are a couple of things in the chat of upcoming events, which sound really fantastic. There's going to be a Women's March on November 3, talking about choice, talking about the importance of voting. And we are all going to be out there with bells and whistles on, making it loud and making it proud and saying, hey, we're 51% of the population. Time to start treating us as such. We appreciate your time.
November 2nd. It'll be a Saturday, November.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the 2nd. I'm sorry. My bad. Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you all very much for hanging in here. It's been a very long meeting, but you guys are great. Karen has one other comment she'd like to make. Go for it.
October 22nd, Fort Lewis, Noble Hall, Ballot Issues Forum put on by it's in the chat, political science and communication students. So if you haven't heard enough, or if you have friends that really want to hear a different take on this, the students are providing this. So it's late in the game, October 22nd at Noble Hall. And a lot of great other events too. So thank you.
It's going to be a super busy month for everybody. And what we personally are looking for more than anything else. Oh, Kathleen Adams, make me one. What we're looking for more than anything else is people to walk and knock. We have a commitment to hit 7,000 doors here in La Plata County between between October 11 and October 20th. So those 2 weekends are going to be huge weekends of action. Once you're trained, you can certainly walk at any time that works for you, walk a neighborhood, walk a few doors one day, walk a few doors the next. We are desperate to get our information out. Our information does include Democrats' position on all of these ballot measures, as well as all of the candidates and their websites. So it's a super helpful piece of literature that people actually keep. They actually keep it and refer to it and vote their ballots more quickly because they have the answers to the ballot measures, which will slow everybody down this year. And the sooner you and your friends vote, the sooner we stop bothering you, we promise. So thank you all very much for being here today. We sure appreciate it. And go tell your friends. There's lots of information. We will have all of this information and a recording up on the website, hopefully on laplatadem's.org 2024 ballot, hopefully very, very soon, probably within 48 hours. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your time.